this work has the potential to transform us. So I went to a training and I heard a quote. So the first part, I'm going to quote from them: "How we respond to injustice can create a hospitable place for others." And I thought, oh yeah, how we respond to the kids. And then I added this part: "When kids know we care, they are also experiencing God's love." Here's my favorite person to quote, Andy Colbert. She says, "I am beloved the whole way through." She also says, "Love is the building block for true resilience." And then she also says, "I hope you find the people who make it easy to exhale." And I look out in the room, and as I was preparing, I was like, oh my word, every time I go to camp, I experience so many positive experiences with the volunteers because we're all looking out for each other. And so it just makes me excited to be able to go to camp and to be able to see God work through all of us. When Pastor was talking this morning and he was talking about our relationship with God, I was just marveling at how many parallel processes there are. We're experiencing goodness from God. Now we're sharing that goodness with the kids. So it kind of is interesting. As I was putting together the slides, I was like, wait, I could talk about this from the kids' perspective. So let's see if we can get to the window of tolerance screen. And so our previous speaker talked about the kids going to that fight or flight. So we've got those two parts of our nervous system, that sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, or perhaps even the fawn part, where maybe they're going into placating or pleasing mode. They're going to make sure all the other kids around them feel okay. But then there's also the other part of their nervous system, or our own, and that's that parasympathetic, and that's where we can get to that rest and digest part. Hopefully you were feeling that with that grounding exercise, the calm and present part. It could also go to where we go to the part of the parasympathetic where we can't handle the stress because it's too much and we freeze up. When we are inside our window of tolerance, we have access to our full brain. And so not the bottom-up stuff she was talking about, but the full brain. And that's where our potential to heal and grow is. When we're not fully inside our window of tolerance, how do you think learning and growing happens? Yeah, not as much. All right, so let's just think about this for ourselves. We're dealing with little sleep at camp. We are trying to juggle all of the things and keep on schedule. Are we in our window of tolerance? So in a couple slides, we'll talk a little bit about getting back in there. I was thinking, though, that when we bear witness to injustice, perhaps maybe as we are reading the kids' stories on Sunday, or hearing them make an offhand comment about maybe, oh, that's not the way it was for me when I was growing up. I think we also feel in our body grief, pain, sadness for them. And I want to give honor to those things because God built us with that moral sense, that sense of justice. And because now our body's going to go into reaction mode. We're going to kind of go to maybe a little fight or flight ourselves because we just read their story and we're like, man, how could anybody go through that? And so I want to be able to encourage us in making sure that that doesn't now become something that stays in our body, that grief and that sorrow. Something that we can be able to nurture ourselves with, and be able to make sure we're not going to carry that grief inside our body in a way that's not healthy. Let me check and see here. I'll have Mickey switch to the next slide.
Can we say thank you to Jared and Heidi real quick? We're going to miss you guys. Yes, we will. I was just coming to tell you they were here.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll shift gears here. So when we are reading that story and maybe we're noticing that our body is starting to feel a little activated, maybe our heart's pounding, or our throat is hurting, or whatever your body goes to. If we try to push that emotion away and ignore it, it's kind of like dismissing the fact that we feel stuff too. And I thought to myself, well, I wasn't the one going through that, what they went through. Why am I feeling bad? But those feelings that we have are valid, and we want to honor that and give ourselves some space. So for reading that on Sunday, maybe we're going to do some breathing exercises. Maybe we're going to pull in something else from our toolkit to take care of ourselves. So a quote down here at the bottom, when pain is met with the love and support needed to repair, we heal. And by the grace of God, we're able to hang on to everything we learned from that experience. And so I'm thinking about the idea that as we are able to respond and give ourselves care and compassion, now we've created a body memory for ourselves, that hey, when we feel that, we can honor it and we can move forward. Okay, so the challenge is oftentimes it's not Sunday evening when we're reading stuff, it's happening throughout the week with the kids, and we don't have time to slow down. So sometimes we have to set things aside to come back to after camp. And so I've got a containment exercise here. If you're in the thick of things, you're dealing with jumping here, running there, no time to slow down, but you hear something and your body has a response, I want to give you permission to come back to that after camp, and so this exercise could be something just to set it aside until you can open back up again. You might visualize placing that story in God's hands, or on a spaceship launched into the sky, or in a huge safe until you can open that back up, maybe on Saturday or Sunday or when you're ready, to be able to say, why did that bother me so much? God, why have you given me such a big heart? So that's something that you can use. I'll have the slide switch again. I went to a conference in October, and the leader of this conference, Steve Cuss, he has a different term for self-care. He calls it a life-giving list, and that's people, places, and activities that bring you life. And the one thing that he said was calendar your life-giving list. And so I was thinking about that. I'm like, boy, when I pack for camp, I pack all this stuff for the campers and the nurses station. But then I got to thinking, I could bring some of my self-care list with me. If I know, boy, if I'm feeling exhausted, I need to listen to a happy song or something, maybe I'm going to bring a couple songs with me. Or call me music for 30-30 or something like that. And then that anxiety piece. The conference talked a lot about that contagiousness. So she was talking about that. If the person's activated, if you're calmer, they'll kind of recognize that. But I also think about, like, sometimes when we are feeling someone else's anxiety and we're wondering, should I be stressed about that? We can just kind of set that boundary. That's their stress. I can be ready for them, but it's not mine. And then I like his phrase, Steve's phrase, that we need to give ourselves permission to be human-sized. And that there are things that are God's that we don't have to take on. So we see some big needs when we go to camp, and some of them we can address, and some of them we can't. We got to go to God with those and let Him be God-sized in that moment. All right. Terminology and tools. So as a parent, I can imagine that you didn't parent every child exactly the same, or as a teacher, you are not teaching every kid exactly the same. So in this terminology, we might apply different tools in different situations. And I heard someone describe compassion, so we'll start with that one. She said, compassion is being attuned to, you resonate with, you understand, you're able to do some co-regulation because you yourself are grounded, and you're able to be calm, curious, and kind. But with empathy, now you're trying to imagine, how would I feel if I were going through the same thing this other person was going through? And you're trying to imagine how would it be like to feel that body sensation, that physical sensation, and that's pretty activating. So this one you might employ every once in a while, but I would encourage you to save that one for less frequent situations and go more towards the compassion. Questions about that one? And then the next slide, I think there's different days where we kind of go about our work with different approaches. So maybe one day we're exhausted, we're just going through the motions, and we're not really putting our heart into it. But then there's other days where maybe we're like, if everything does not go the way I planned, I'm not going to be okay. So I'm kind of trying to describe those two separate kind of extremes. And we may notice, boy, I'm kind of veering towards the personalizing, or I'm veering towards the too disconnected. How can I get back in this middle where I'm joining God? We're doing this as a team, rather than putting too much pressure on ourselves or not enough. I came across this quote, and I was thinking about this in the context of motivations, because I think we all bring motivations with us to camp. We are passionate about kids, and we're passionate about restorative justice, like someone said earlier. And this quote I did print out in your packet, so if you want to go back to it, make notes on it. But I'm going to read it out because I think it does kind of speak to the actionable or measurable goals that we can make for ourselves at camp. Because I don't want to get to the end of camp and say, I didn't meet the thing that I'm most passionate about. So it says, as if the cost of unresolved trauma were not high enough, it also means that people are often less able to experience goodness. Why does this matter? Without foundational experiences of care, co-regulation, safety, joy, and hope, or what Andi refers to as resources, the kids will have less capacity to fully process their experiences. So that might leave the kids more apt to be re-traumatized because it's as though their body is having to work from a starved state. So moments of connection, co-regulation, and beauty are the things that make us human, and when we don't have access to these things, we have less ability to move through difficulty from a neurobiological standpoint. Which is why helping the campers to experience even momentary glimmers, I love that word, glimmers of hope, peace, and care matters so much. I heard someone say glimmer is like the opposite of a trigger. In so many ways, the goodness is not an accessory to healing, it's a primary element of repair. So it's why healing is inextricably linked to helping the kiddos learn at the pace they're able to reconnect to goodness. And I thought, I kind of like
carry that around in my heart. When I'm with a difficult client, I just kind of hold that in my heart, be still and know. So having those scripture verses ready in your own heart so that you can connect on the fly, that's what I call that. Okay, so this is a little bit different than self-care itself, but I think it will help everyone when you're doing this work and you're I call it being in the trenches. Just remember, and I'm sure you've heard this, but these behaviors that the kids have, the more difficult, challenging behaviors, they're not personal. What's happening in their brains is, it's a trauma response. You know, these kids have severe developmental attachment wounds, and their brains have wired to protect them. So when they're pushing you away and you haven't done anything, maybe you looked at it or you used a soothing voice, and that activated their fight or flight system. So they go into this, what I call a bottom-up tantrum. That means it's coming deep down from the limbic system. It's a reaction. It's a fight or flight response. A top-down tantrum are those my own kids. They want the cookie, so they're like, yeah, I'm going to throw a tantrum. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. It's from their prefrontal cortex. It's coming from a much higher up place. This is not that. When you have these kids that are engaging in their behaviors, they're not being purposefully oppositional. They're in a place of fight or flight. So I think holding that in our minds helps when you're actually dealing with it. You can see it through that trauma lens. It's way easier. Another thing, working in the foster care system for all those years, these kiddos, they don't have the ability to regulate their emotions like we do, because when you are subjected to trauma in early years, there are all sorts of things happening. There's a bunch of cortisol going on in the brain. There's an over-pruning of synapses. They actually kind of start life not even being able to regulate as well as other people, and that's rough. Then they've got all the other stuff on top of that. So I think it's just important to keep that in mind. Again, this is not your fault. This is not intentional on their part. And then finally, Your calm presence is enough. You do not have to know what to do. You do not have to know what to say in every circumstance. And that helps with self-care, because if you put that responsibility on yourself, it's really easy. That pressure can just like, I don't want to go back tomorrow. I didn't know what to say. You don't have to know what to say. I don't know, has anyone ever heard of mirror neurons? These really cool neurons in our brain that help us to feel the emotions of other people. So you've heard laughter is contagious, and that's why. So if someone comes in and they're laughing and they're cracking up, you kind of like, yeah, that's funny, I feel good. That's your mirror neurons at work. If someone comes in angry, you kind of get angry, or sad, you kind of feel the sadness. We all have mirror neurons. So if the kid starts to, have a challenging behavior and you can stay calm, you're really helping their mirror neurons not get activated. Because if you start to get anxious, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get anxious. So just knowing that that's all you have to do is breathe, ground, stay calm, and then take some time to do some self-care. I think that's it. I didn't want to keep you too long.
Have you got questions?
Oh, questions, yes. Does anyone have questions? How do I do in time?
Oh, Dan.
Dan.
Okay. I remember my first year at camp. One of the things that helped me the most was just knowing that we're all in this together, and you can ask for help, and you can tap out if you need to, and help. Just ask, and people will step up. It's a nice comfort.
Yeah, there's a lot of you. I walked in and got chills. I did for real. I was like, wow, look at all these helpers. It's amazing. I'm glad you said that, Dan. How long have you been doing this, Dan?
It's be 14.
Awesome.
100 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty good at myself remaining calm when there's challenging behaviors. What would you say when like two kids are going at it and one is like either physically or emotionally hurting another kid?
Yeah,
Stay calm.
yeah, I'm sure you guys have protocols on how to handle that specifically, but it is important to separate them because they're not in a state. I'll tell you this, you cannot reason with anyone who's in the fight or flight. They are not online. They have to get online. And sometimes that means going through the entire tantrum and letting them calm down. What I often will suggest to the parents I work with is it's really important to attune. You're not like telling them how to feel. You're just saying, wow, I can tell you're angry. I'm here. I'm gonna, let's separate you. I wouldn't suggest separating the kids though, because if you don't, it's only gonna get worse. But yeah, attuning to the kid's emotional state. And sometimes that'll make them mad, by the way, if you say, you look angry, I'm not angry. I can tell you're not angry. But yeah, it just, or you look sad, or you look, you're not gonna try to fix it. That's really important. Don't try to fix it. It's not gonna work. Good question, though. And do you have like protocols, like if they get into fights and things like that, like how you?
Bethany is our connections coach, and Celeste over here is our camp psycho, as she likes to be called. And so when we have kiddos that are in hard situations, they'll kind of jump in.
Yeah.
They'll get time with Celeste or Bethany.
Awesome. Any other questions?
And I am going to say that what Tiffany provided on using grounding in the real world is really helpful, so I'm going to make sure that we all have a copy of this to have at hand, because I think they're great tools for you to have.
I had no idea how many people, so like you're gonna laugh. 8 copies. Isn't that cute?
Kids, that would work.
All right. No more questions? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Would it be beneficial to discuss what to do when you have a conflict with another adult and the kids are around?
That's, you know what? When I think of that, like I think of like the parents I work with, I'm always like, you don't argue in front of those kids. You don't, because they're like, aha, I can split them, right? I can split them in two. So you're gonna need to take that away, and you're gonna have to say, we're gonna discuss this later. let's just discuss this later. And I would repeat that. If the other adult is getting amped, I would say, I don't think any of you look like you would get amped, but I would just repeat it. I call those one-liners. We'll talk about this later. Okay, we'll talk about this later. Okay, we'll talk about this later. I try that on my kids, it works. Okay, we'll talk about this later.
But how would you suggest stopping an action that you know is not going to be beneficial if they're adults doing that?
I would address the adult and say, hey, can we do something over here? Just, can you talk to me for a second? I mean, keep your eyes on the kids, but I would, again, you don't want to like say, hey, you're doing that wrong. You're not doing that right. I would try to say, hey, I would do it as much as what I'm saying is in secret, like not secret, but I hate the word secret, private. I'd do that in private and then just address it and say, let's talk about this later. I don't know, have you guys ever had that experience? Has anyone had that experience? You're laughing because you have.
My only reason why I haven't been in that situation is that, but I've used faith as, for me, you know, she's the dean of women, is that if you're having a conflict, I'd talk to her. Even if it's like just a personality, like it feels like we're not communicating or whatever it is, like I just go to faith and like chat it out and figure out a better strategy. So I utilize your dean of women and dean of men.
Yeah. And our connections coach and our guest. All of those four are available.
I know that there was just one year, and this was a long time ago, where we had a guide that just could not keep in line with how she was treating the campers. And I just wondered if, you know, I mean, the staff all talked about it and, you know, tried to figure out strategies, but it's just a really challenging situation.
And I dare say it's probably not all going to go perfect. Like you might have those rifts, and you're going to handle them as best you can and try to do those in private. And at the end of the day, if something really out of line happens, then you're going to go back and repair that as best you can and say, you know, we messed up. It happens.
So sorry. Anything more?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, that was important. Thank you.
It is now time for Nurse Val.
Nurse Val. Here she comes from way out back.
Alrighty. Alright, well, a little bit about my background. I worked for 10 years with a program for first-time parents, and I heard a lot of stories. And at first I didn't know how to deal with it, and I'll probably cry. But I did a lot of learning, and I will shamelessly quote a lot of people today. So my hope, when I was telling my aunt last night, I was like, I'm doing this presentation. She's like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I talked to somebody last year, and they were really insecure about whether their part of camp made a difference for the kids. And I want everybody here to know that you are all so valuable, that each one of you has a powerful role, and no matter what insecurities you're feeling, that we can sustain the work that we do and go home at the end of the week and say, I did a great job, and I was on team with God. Sure. Yeah. So before we start, so I can calm myself down, we're going to practice a grounding exercise, just like she was talking about. So on slide 3, I'm just going to have you just all take a deep breath where you're at, and notice something that you can see. And then I might invite you to notice something that you can touch. Something you might be hearing. Something you can smell, and hopefully good. And something you can taste. This is one of my favorite grounding exercises, and I operate on this whenever I go into work and the camp's having a rough day. Or if one of the campers is calling a camp, This is one of my go-tos. So I use it a lot for myself, and then I am happy to share it with you. I'm sure that you all have favorite grounding exercises you use, but I just shared one of mine. So on slide 4,
When they arrive here, they get a backpack and it's filled with school supplies. And then we also have a dry erase board so that you can have that at all times, and they'll have dry erase markers that are for kids because they're low odor, so they aren't, strong smell. And so then, like if you need them to do something quiet, they can just pull out this dry erase board and they can draw on it. One side has lines, the other side is blank, and so then they have those that they can utilize while they're need some time. And also, it's great for the bus and all those great things. And they each get to choose a fidget for the bus, and then they're each getting a water bottle that they can decorate and write their name on at registration. And we didn't choose them this time. We wanted to give them a choice of what color they would want. And there are smaller water bottles, because some of our kids are small. And those big water bottles are tough for them to carry around. And so these are smaller, a little bit lighter weight, and it'll work with the carabiner that we got that has the flashlight on them. So so they do have the backpacks coming. We do have to take out, because I ordered them with all the supplies in them, and they come with a pencil sharpener. So we have to take the pencil sharpener, because that's considered a weapon. So they could harm themselves with them if they would put it to. And before I introduce our next speaker, guys, in your folders, you'll find 4 cards, paper clipped together, has your campers' names on them. If you would write them each a note and get it to me before you leave today, or somehow before, we could bring it to commissioning at church so that we can put them in the campers' bags. And commissioning is next Sunday, a week from tomorrow. Here at Arvada Covenant, the service is at 10 o'clock, and they will just pray for us and they'll have us stand up, and then people will pray for us during the service. So would love for any or all of you to be able to come. And I would say, let's wear these shirts. Let's wear the purple ones, or purple, this is blue. And then we're also going to try to all sit together so that they can see all of us together. So I would like to introduce, speaking of church, about a month ago, was it?
I think it was.
A little bit over a month ago. Tiffany spoke, as we've been speaking about your emotions and being a Christian with emotions, and is it okay? And we heard Tiffany speak, and she did such a wonderful job that we asked her to come and share with us, because it's so important to take care of ourselves. So please welcome Tiffany Fair.
First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for doing this. So I'm a social worker, and I've 8 years working in the foster care system in Texas. And I can't tell you, and I think you already know this, how important this work is. Now, being a social worker, I learned about self-care by not doing it for the first probably 5 years of my life, my career. So I feel like I've got a pretty good skill set now with that. So that's why I've been asked to speak to you about this. You can go ahead and change the slide. So, I did a little slide on what it is. I know it may sound really basic, but there's a couple things that I think are really important. It is something that you do to take care of yourself, right? Like that may be obvious, but one thing to remember is it's not just self-indulgence. You're not just like, yeah, I got the second ice cream because I deserve it. It's not that. Self-care is something that you recognize in yourself that you need. So you have to be really mindful of what's happening in yourself and recognize when you're starting to feel some feels that might be challenging. So you're really responding to what's happening inside of yourself. It is a result of mindful reflection, not just second ice cream kind of sounds good. And another thing to remember is it often requires boundary setting. Social workers aren't great at that, and I know sometimes helpers aren't great at that. We want to say yes, we want to just do and be, and we sometimes can just ignore what we need, and that is detrimental. Again, it's not selfish, it's not lazy. We have to do this. If you're going to show up for these kids, you really have to engage in self-care. Go to the next slide. Don't want to yell into this. So, a couple things to remember. Why is this important? I can tell you right now, the first year that I did not engage in self-care, I was a wreck. Like, I was so burned out. I didn't even want to go to work. I started resenting the kids I was working with. That's not good. When you start to resent these kids, that's the last thing they need. They need unconditional regard, positive regard. But it happens because we're humans, you know. So humans aren't meant to ignore their needs, and they're not meant to just plow through hard things without recognizing what's happening. Self-care energizes us, it refreshes us emotionally, it helps us build compassion for the kids that we're working with, the people that we're working with. It also increases motivation. I don't know if you guys have ever just felt like, I can't do this anymore, this is too hard. This will help you not lose your motivation. And then really important, it spiritually centers us. We have to engage in self-care if we are going to focus on what God wants us to do. Otherwise, we're just gonna lose it. Obviously, it helps with stress management, and it models self-compassion. So I always tell people, set boundaries, engage in self-care, because you're modeling that for other people. So you're giving them permission to do the same thing. And I can tell you, you guys probably know, there's lots of examples in the Bible where Jesus models self-care for his disciples, or it's repeatedly. We'll look at that in a little while. Okay, so how does this actually look when you are working with kids and you are in the thick of it? Couple things to do. Make sure you know your limits. Like, when I first got into social work, I was like, limits, whatever. Yeah, I learned. So know your limits. Know what kind of sets you off. Know what kinds of things are upsetting to you. Know how to read yourself. Don't ignore your cues. And by that I mean body sensations. Your heart's racing. Your stomach's churning. Really pay attention to that stuff. It's important. Also accept those limits with compassion, self-compassion. Don't compare yourself to your neighbor and be like, man, Dan just goes and goes. He never stops. He's always happy. I don't feel that way. Something's wrong with me. No, everyone is different in their capacities. That's not a judgment call. Obviously, and I hope this is obvious, please get enough sleep. Please. And for those of you, I'm really, in my family, I'm known as being hangry. And we have all these stories about me getting hangry. Please don't get hangry. Make sure you're well fed. Make sure you're sleeping, because your window to handle stress is going to narrow smaller and smaller the less you take care of yourself. Again, I said this, attune to your emotional state, mindfulness. That's like a catchphrase in my therapy world, but it is really important. Mindful just means you are recognizing your thoughts, your emotions, your body sensations, your perceptions. Do that, and it's interesting, because if you can do that, and you can just think to yourself, okay, I am noticing that I'm feeling angry. You're a lot less likely to get swept away by your anger. So just noticing it can be really powerful. Find ways to decompress throughout the day. So I know that when you're in the thick of it, you can't just say, like, time out, I'm leaving. Really important to have some skills that you can just lean on throughout the day. Things like breathing, grounding. And I actually have little hands out that I put on the table. There's like one per table. But they're just ideas on how to ground yourself. That doesn't mean like confining yourself to your room, grounding. It means helping you to detach from overwhelming emotions and sort of stay in the present moment. So I've got a bunch of ideas on that. Now the ideas on your handouts that I'll pass out in a minute are for people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, because I specialize in trauma therapy. So some of those may be a little much, but some of them are going to work great for you, some of them aren't going to work so well. So I tell people, try some, see if they help. And then there's like muscle tension, like clenching your fist, relaxing. Be careful with that. I mean, if you're clenching your fist, that might give a kid a kind of a warning, or they might, interpret that differently than you mean it. And then laughter, obviously. So laughter engages your social engagement system in your brain. I think it's a funny story. You guys might not think it's funny. But so my mom was the head psychiatric nurse of a children's residential treatment center. Tough job. And they did things a little differently back then. Not great. But one day, a kiddo got out. I think it was a teenager, and they are running down the halls, causing all sorts of chaos. My mother and an orderly decide they're gonna chase this kid and they're going to restrain him, which I hate restraining kids. Oh, that's terrible. But anyway, that's what they did back then. So they got this kid. They're rolling around on the ground. The orderly's like, "Get his shoes, Donna. Get his shoes." Take his shoes off because kicking hurts. All of a sudden, my mom's like, "I got his shoes. I got them." And he goes, "Donna, I think you just took off my shoes." And then my mom and the orderly and the kid just stopped and they looked at each other and they started cracking up. And then when everybody else got on scene, all they were doing was sitting on the floor laughing. All of them were laughing. It was it was like, I think of that story all the time when I think about how important laughter is. And then, communicate your needs to one another to get help. It's okay to say, "Okay, I am struggling right now. I need to take a step back." Make sure that you are doing that. It's not weakness to take a step back. It's actually really powerful and really strong if you have that ability to go, "Whoa, I am struggling here. Time to move to a different place." I think that's a huge strength. If you're going to be in a helping profession or help others, that's imperative. You've got to do that. And then finally, feed yourself spiritually. Hopefully, it probably goes without saying, but there's so many examples of Jesus doing just that. He does not plow through and ignore, and he connects with God throughout the Bible. He gets away and he does this. So that is really important. If he does that, we sure as heck better be doing that, right? Okay, good change. And then these are just some examples of that. I can't really see that. I can try. It says, "The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, 'Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest.' So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place." So that's an example of Jesus sending them away to do self-care, to connect. And then the next example is Jesus actually doing this himself. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake and he was alone on land. He was alone. That's so critical, to be alone and just plug in to what God wants you to do. I said in church, it was a month ago, my scripture, because I don't memorize things well, is just be still and know. Be still and know that I am God. So
Just a summary of what are the roles and responsibilities for staff, people at camp, as well as guides. So if you look in your packets, you will have a Staffer Guide 101, and I am just very, very quickly, it's going to be a lightning round of going through some of the things just as reminders. We only do this once a year, so I think sometimes we forget some of the details of camp. So I won't go through all of this, but I'm just going to highlight a few things. If you find that one of your campers or even you has forgotten something, your toothbrush or a pair of socks or some underwear, let Ken know or let me know, and we will be happy to run to Walmart and pick those items up for you. So if you can let us know the first day of camp, it would be really helpful. Have we talked about what to do with a camper? What's the bed? Is somebody talking about that?
The same thing as the washer and dryer is in the chalet this year, which is down the road, and the nurses will do the same thing, put it just outside your cabin and let the nurses know discreetly. We don't want to shame any kiddos with it, and it'll just be the same as usual. And the nurses will take care of washing the bedding, or we don't.
Thank you, nurses.
Thank you.
And then we talked a little bit last night about modest dress, so I just want to remind you all of, wearing shorts that extend longer than your fingertips and that sort of thing.
So you don't want them shorter than your fingertips.
Did I say extend longer than, extend longer than the length of your fingertips. You do want them to extend, yes. And no Speedos, guys, no. They like to wear those. And no keys for the women. So if you wear a two-piece, a tankini or a one-piece swimsuit. would be great.
Right.
So the guides know you're responsible for coming up with a theme for your room and decorating your room. Generally, the guides just take materials that you already have at home, or maybe spend a small amount of money in purchasing items that might be used from year to year. If you do want reimbursement, we would ask that you not spend more than $30 per room, but I think most guides just pay for that. You will have time on Sunday afternoon to decorate the rooms prior to the kiddos' arrival. We also talked briefly about name signs, so preparing name signs, which could be on a cardboard poster board, or you could even make something durable that the kiddos can take home and have from year to year. We recommend that you maybe come up with a Bible verse that it might be meaningful to them. You could put that on the front or the back. Maybe what does their name mean to them, and customizing those name signs. We did talk about group identifiers, maybe having, I know we're gonna have the armbands this year, wristbands this year, but also sometimes caps or leis or colored bandanas or something as a means of identifying a cohesive group. Memory books. So Gina Higgins, who is not able to volunteer at camp any longer, physically at camp, but has spent an enormous amount of time of helping all of the guides in preparing activity pages in advance that can be put into these memory books. And so each guide for each kiddo will be getting one of these guidebooks and then a packet of these pages that you can just slide in. So we're hoping that will make it a lot easier on every evening when you're working to prepare these, that you're not staying up until 11 o'clock at night, every night, doing these memory books. Nikki, anything else you wanted me to talk about with memory books?
I'd say let's just make sure we pray for Gina. She's, health-wise, she's declining, and we just need to be praying for her.
Yeah, if you all knew, I've spent hours with Gina teaching me how the work that she has done on these. She has put in an enormous amount of time and money in preparing these for you, and it means so much to her. So
We will have at camp so that we get everybody there. We will have a thank you card for everybody to sign that we can send to her.
yeah, she's amazing. So snacks for the evenings, if y'all want to bring something to share. That was one thing my first year, I didn't realize we were supposed to bring snacks to share in the evenings when everybody goes and works on the memory books. Heart notes, there is a pocket in the back here where, as you collect heart notes for the kiddos throughout the week, you can stick them in this. So think about sizing if you write heart notes, something that is 4 to 6 inches or smaller. Nikki.
Also for the heart notes, this year Callie's going to be taking care of Royal Mail, and she's going to track the campers, and we will keep that in the fireside lounge where our meals are, but we aren't going to, we'll just have it available during guide and staff meetings, so you can see which kiddos need some notes if they are don't have as many as other kids. And then we'll also be cognizant of if only 2 campers in a group get notes, or nobody will get them that time, or Callie will just make sure that we get people to write those notes so that they can get them, and they'll be delivered once a day, not at all.
Not at mealtime, is that what you're saying?
No heart notes at bedtime. They'll be delivered to the campers at their tables just at 1 p.m.
Well, and I was going to say, I think the guides will find during the week is they don't have a lot of capacity for writing heart notes. If you do, fantastic, but I really encourage the staff to write heart notes if you have the time. And not just for the campers, for other volunteers. If you see another volunteer that you think has been a real blessing to a kiddo or to you, if you would take the time to write a heart note, because we all need encouragement during camp. 30-30 time, yes, Alex.
And campers can write heart notes to other campers, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And Callie will be reviewing those.
Review.
Yeah, no last names, phone numbers, email addresses, that kind of thing. 30-30 time. I think it took me 8 years to figure out what 30-30 time actually was, so I was really violating that. But it's a state law that kiddos have at least 30 minutes of time actually on their beds where they rest every day, and then 30 minutes of downtime where they could be, playing together or playing a game, but doing something a little more quiet. Although I will say, a lot of guides find that's a great time to practice for their variety show performance. I think that's okay.
Would you say that's okay?
It's okay.
You're the dean of women, so.
So, variety show, as you all know, that is, for me, one of the highlights of the week. And woohoo, yay. So be encouraging your kiddos to do something, get on stage if they feel comfortable with that, or in a group. I already made a special request to Elisa for something that she did last year that I thought was outstanding. Let's see, swim time is when guides are able to take a break, and we do really encourage you to take that time. Your kiddos may ask you to come and see them while they're swimming, and yes, sure, go see them, encourage them, clap for them, and then go take a nap. So really take that downtime whenever you have an opportunity. But we need the staff people to be on site helping out with swimming, since the guides are going to be taking a break at that time. I think we talked about spray sunscreen versus lotion sunscreen. Okay. Shower time for the guides. Sorry, this is getting tedious, but shower time for the guides. You can get up before the campers get up. Coordinate with the staff people or your co-guide as far as who can leave the room, or so as you're maintaining 2 deep coverage. You may choose to shower while the kiddos are swimming. That's another option. Keepsake gifts. A lot of guides we've kind of developed this tradition where when you're saying goodbye to your campers at the end of the week, you may present them with a keepsake gift. Something that might be meaningful as a remembrance of camp. We ask that you not spend more than $20 and that you don't give a lot of gifts. Well, don't give any other gifts really throughout the week, because that has in the past gotten a little out of hand, where guides were constantly showering their campers with gifts. And these kids get a lot of gifts throughout the week. They get, these things in the bags over here. They get birthday gifts. And so we really want this to be equitable, so there isn't one group of campers that's getting all these gifts and others are not. So keep that in mind. I'm going to quickly go through the staff 101, which will not be as lengthy, but I would say for staffers, develop the gift of noticing. Just pay attention to what needs to be done around you, who needs help. If a staffer asks you to help them walk a kiddo to the restroom to maintain 2 deep coverage, and you are available to do that, please say yes. It's really important. We've talked about that today. We've gotten a little lax in recent years in maintaining 2 deep coverage, so we're really going to be focused on that this year. Interact with the campers as much as possible. I love being a staffer because you can interact with all the kids. If you're a female staffer, you can sit with the boys at lunch. And if campers ask you to join them for lunch, and you say yes, do not disappoint them, and please show up for lunch. And I also see that as an opportunity for the guides to get a little bit of a break, even at mealtime, because kids love to engage with the staffers as well. So I would encourage you to do that. Let's see. Cabin duty is maybe the last thing I want to talk about. So while the guides are working on the memory books, Ken and I will be putting together schedules for what we call angel duty, where we have people that are assigned in the mornings and also in the evenings while the guides are out of the rooms to watch over the kiddos and make sure we're maintaining 2 deep coverage. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be posting them somewhere, not sure where yet, but we will be coming up with schedules for that. So anything that I forgot about that's important, or any questions?
There's probably a time limit on that angel duty, right?
Yes.
Yes. So at night in particular, we'll let the guides know what time they need to be back in the rooms, and then It'll be scheduled,
It's on the
yes.
schedules already. The one-
Oh, it's on the schedule.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Holly.
I know birthday cards was in here. We already did that, so you can disregard that one. You're welcome.
Okay, that's it, that's all?
Oh,
See
okay,
how it came?
one more. Are they're getting backpacks, right?
Yeah,
Okay, because those were like gold last year. Thanks.
so,
They were
yeah, I'll explain that, and then I'm gonna introduce our next speaker. Thanks, Betty. So,
Hi, Bethany. What's up?
What's up? There are flip-it cards on your table, I think, maybe. Make sure you guys get one of each of them. There's also, if you need a mind challenge, there's a Royal Family puzzle that has been created. That's all those little pieces, if you haven't done it yet today. Got enough? But yes, we're going to flash through this tool. If you have been around for a few years, it has, we talked about it a few years ago, and we've talked about it all day long with Val and with Tiffany and Celeste and myself and what you all have shared. Just another visual and tool. We're not going to talk long about it, and then we're going to break into some work time for guides and staff to look at files or to plan if you have some activity center things that you'd like to plan, and then we'll be done. And then we're cut back in 2 weeks. So, for those of you who were a few years ago, what do you remember about the tool Flip It? And you can say nothing.
Nothing.
Good job, Sue. Thanks for being honest. You can also say nothing because you weren't here a few years ago. It may have even been pre-COVID, I have no idea. But it is an acronym, as everything is in education and mental health. And it's just one of those tools. If you need some language, like a language piece to communicate with kids when we're having those situations that we've all described all day. F stands for feelings, and it's just that. Like, reflect the feeling that you think you're having. Oh my goodness, you are so sad. Wow, you are so mad. Yeah, it's super disappointing when you don't get what you want. And you can pair it with what you see in here. You don't even have to come up with anything fancy. Be like, man, I see you sitting by the tree, not wanting to go anywhere. And that means you see and hear them. Like, here I am, send me. We're doing that. We're being present with them. After the feeling, L stands for limit. We're following up with a limit. We know these kids have come from hard places. We know they've experienced a lot of inconsistency, and it's not one of those things of like, yes, just tell the kid yes all the time. That's what love is.
No.
That's not, thank you. That's not what love is. We need to set limits, and we need to make sure they're positive limits. What does that phrase mean to you guys? Positive limits.
Well, that you say in a kind way, like what the expectation is.
Yes, 2 things, your tone of voice, and say what you want them to do. Stop running!
I want you to.
I would like you to walk. Walk, please!
We walk at camp.
Yeah, we walk at camp.
We walk at.
Just fill it in with what they want, like shortcut, right? We've talked about with Tiffany a lot fight or flight in experiencing new situations, and we're just going to shortcut it for them. It's a whole new week. We're a whole new human to them, so don't get fancy with all of these limits and expectations. Just tell them what you want them to do. We need to be sitting down at the lunch table right now. That's the expectation. Next one is inquiries in those tiny letters. Fancy way to say questions. How can you get them into problem-solving mode? That is a question. We here are professional problem solvers because 1, you've made it to adulthood. So you have solved enough problems in your life that you have made it to this point in your life. You've raised kids, you've had jobs, you've voted, you've paid your taxes, hopefully most of these things. But it's like, we want them to be problem solvers. So what can that inquiry be like? Man, how can we solve this problem together? That seems really hard. It's really hard to be a kid right now, and we still need to sit down and eat our lunch. How can we do this together? It's that partnership, it's the joining, it's that connection, it's using the stuff you already know. Like Scott said, I know they're really stoked about playing Gaga Ball after this, and so I'm going to use that as far as when I get to a prompt, the last one. Prompts are optional. It is a creative cue or clue or suggestion for how they can solve that problem. If they already know, like, yeah, I think it'd really help if I just sat next to you, or I don't want to sit next to Jimmy right now. Okay, great, we can make that happen. We are flexible. And sometimes they need a creative cue or clue. If you're gonna sell it, like it's 2 o'clock on a Saturday and you've been in training all day, and you're like, let's go, just be Spider-Man, let's go. Walk. Or use your enthusiasm, be like, can we shoot our spidey senses all the way to the adventure center? You know, like, how are you selling it? Is going to be whether or not going to help you with your prompt and your creative cue and clue to support them. So, quickly a reminder, we're really going to go over this with a few more scenarios on Sunday, knowing when we're in camp mode, because we're at camp, and everyone will be there with us. Any thoughts or questions or concerns right now? And then I'm going to address one more thing, and then we're going to do group work. Yes? Okay, so we talked about this morning, how we've talked about taking care of ourselves. If that hasn't felt like a theme today, it was a theme. That was our theme. Take care of yourselves. You are the most important person. And continue to draw on those things about what works for you in times of stress, and when you're away, whatever's going to work, use your systems. If you need systems, Faith, Ken, Mickey, Will, myself, Celeste, etc. But what happens when it's not just one-on-one? When you're not just like hanging out? We got 3 hours to like, let's talk about all the things that have happened. What happens when there's multiple adults? That's come up a couple of times that are trying to work with a kid. And what happens when it's not just one child having a hard time at the same time? How many of you have been in that situation? Yeah. So some of those pieces are continue to use the tools, continue to take care of yourself, continue to ask for help, be proactive with those strategies, and hopefully this will be the smallest amount of time for our whole week. Where it does seem like it is the whole group and everyone's wiling out, and it's not because they're starving. It's something else, like we can't figure out what it is. But I would say, and I would encourage you, and Celeste and I are going to do this, when it is, and we do have phenomenal walkies, hopefully, that we can utilize, but utilize staff. Utilize all of the people so that you can continue that connection and that relationship with the kid. It would be cool if they hung out with Celeste and I all week, except then we're the ones that have the relationship with that kid. And we're not sleeping in their cabin, and we're not doing activity centers and meals with them. And so we really want you guys to be the ones that continue that relationship. And so even if it is, hey, call one of us, we'll come in, we're probably going to stick with you with the kid, so that you can continue that process. We're going to stay too deep and hopefully continue so that we can either continue with those activities or continue with what's going on, but still be able to let you do these processes with the kids and let you do them. If that frightens you, take a deep breath. And know that we will be there. And if it is a time and I come into the situation or Celeste and like, hey, what do you need? Be like, I need a break. Great, you're out. Good. See you in 5, see you in 10, whatever it is. If it is like, hey, it just seems like we're having a really hard time making it to archery. Awesome, let's walk together. But we really want to make it so that you continue with the kids in your group so that you have that relationship and you can continue that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Time to meet your kids?
Anyone else to pick up if they haven't?
Oh, okay. Where's their files, camper files?
I'm coming.
Ooh.
I'm right here.
You running right up there.
I'm running, I'm fast.
Mm-hmm.
Not these days, but. Okay. They are by guide groups, so you can send one of your guides up and we will pass them out. Here's the boys.
So you're welcome to go through these with all the tools and the things that we have in mind today. Read through, ask questions, call us over. If you're a staff, you're welcome to work on the planning.
And then just try to keep them, if they have stuff paper clipped to them, keep it together, and then you're going to give it back to us and so we can give it to the nurses, like boys and girls.
Cool. Any other questions? Great job! Girls? I think I'm girls. I know.
I was so excited. I was like, oh, shit.
It's okay, we all came up to.
We gave you all our stuff.
I saw that.
Like that with some of our purpose or our passion or our goals for what we're doing at camp. So if you're pondering your motivations and you're like, boy, mine seems really kind of big world, or I'm not quite sure how that's going to look, I'd encourage you to maybe set a goal for camp that you know is kind of something that you can carry out. For myself, my goal for camp as a camp nurse is whenever a camper comes to the nurses station, I want the camper to know that what they're experiencing in their body is heard so that they can learn to trust their body. And so you each might have a different goal, but that's something that I feel that I can achieve at camp, rather than having a goal where you're going to leave and feel like, boy, I didn't achieve it at all. A couple other tools. We'll switch to the next slide. For yourself, notice when, where, or with whom your body feels settled. Maybe you're noticing, boy, I'm really gelling with a couple of these volunteers over here. See if you can increase, even if only just slightly at camp, the times you allow yourself to engage in activities that settle you. Once you have a sense of what nourishes you, if you know you're going into a pretty intense morning with the kids with an activity they're not into, or one of the campers is having a hard time, see if you can sandwich those difficult moments and experiences between goodnesses and resources. And you might be doing that for you, but you're also inviting the kids to come along and sandwich as well. Another breathing exercise. This is a verse you might be able to read to yourself as you're inhaling, and then reading the other part as you exhale. So I put that on your printout as well, so you can come back to that and test it out. So we talked a lot about self-care, but the one thing that I will highlight is prayer time. And sharing with each other, hey, I want some prayer about that. So I got really excited about the prayer board. Friday, some of the routines that we have to shift from being with the campers to kind of transitioning home help us to be able to kind of shift gears a little. The action of taking our name badge off can really help us to shift gears. The prayer board, celebrating those wins. The debrief, I think, is one of the most powerful parts of week when we're hearing about all the stories around the room, knowing that everybody's touched the kids in some way. And then at home, I know it's really easy to want to get back into your to-do list. All the weight that you had to set aside for the week, now you're going to carry back on. The things that are important, but also say to yourself, hey, refresh a little after camp is also valuable for my soul as well. So taking that time, and that might look different for everyone. Perhaps someone needs to nap, someone needs to go for a hike and process, or someone needs to journal. So find that if you know what you need. And then at my old job, we used to say a goodbye wish to each patient that I worked with. And I thought, this could be something we could do, a little goodbye prayer for each camper until we see them at club or until we see them at camp next year. And so you might write your own. I gave a sample example of what mine would look like, but you might choose your own to be able to kind of, when those thoughts arise, I wonder how this person's doing, you can revisit that prayer. And write down successes. I did well at, I achieved my goal. I listened well when so-and-so said this. Or I witnessed God creating a glimmer moment for this other camper. And so our goal is to sustain. On the paper that I put in your folder, I have lots of resources listed. If you're curious about checking out any of the resources that I've been following or reading, my favorite is Andi Kolberg because of the way that she just captures everything so gently. And that's what I have to share with you today.
Thank you, Val. Nurse Val. All right, why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll have Bethany up here again. So take a 10-minute break to stretch, walk around, eat some food back there. We've got lots of food.